You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this very important visit of Zalmay Khalilzad to Pakistan, where he's going to hold some very important meetings with the military leadership as well as the government officials. Now, as we all know that the peace process is still on, we are talking about the intra-Afghan dialogue, then obviously a lot of meetings will be held. But at least we can say that this entire process, though it's slow, but is moving in the right direction. Obviously, the role of the regional countries, whether it's Pakistan or China or Russia or Central Asian states, that's very significant. Role of the spoilers, obviously I'm talking about India, that is also very significant. This is not the first time that they've been able to sabotage the peace process. They've done it earlier as well, a few times actually indeed. Now, this process, which is very complicated, whether you talk about the release of the prisoners and then the role of those prisoners released by the Afghan government, what exactly are they up to? The Afghan government believes that they are joining hands with the other factions of Taliban and even Daesh, and creating a lot of problems for this region, and especially when we talk about the peace process. And then on top, there was this 4-point agenda presented by the Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Will be also talking about that. We'll also be talking about another very important factor, that what if everything is settled down post withdrawal, post US forces withdrawal scenario. That is also going to be something very important. But since this is going to be a very complicated process, there are a lot of nitty-gritties, a lot of ifs and buts. There is a huge trust deficit among various stakeholders that is also playing a very, very important role. But how to move forward and eventually how to achieve the desired results. Now, that is the key. To talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Mr. Janjua. Mr. Janjua is a former military officer and is also an analyst. Yasir Saab, thank you very much for your time, sir. And we'll be also talking to Abdul Basit Saab, another senior analyst, and he'll be joining us over Skype from Singapore. Basit Saab, thank you very much for your time as well. Thank you so much. And now, sir, let me start off from this very important factor. That is about the visit of Zalmay Khalilzad. Obviously, this man is playing a very vital role, and I'm sure he wants this entire episode to be finished before the US elections. I think this is the primary agenda. Now, he's in Pakistan. He'll be talking to the high-ups. Now, let's throw light on the factors, sir. Obviously, everything seems to be moving in the right direction, but obviously, there are a lot of hiccups as well. Whether you talk about the release of the Taliban prisoners held by the Afghan government, and they believe that these prisoners eventually are joining hands with the ground troops or the fighting forces of the Taliban. That is one concern. Second is again about the trust deficit among various groups. Third is about the post-withdrawal scenario. What exactly is going to happen? Who's going to take over? Who's going to look after the affair? Is it going to be a mutual kind of an engagement, or individual steps would be taken? So these are some very important factors. Let's start off from that.
Okay, thank
Janjua
you.
Saab.
Thank you, Faisal, for inviting me today. The most important thing in the whole scenario for you to understand and for us to see is that all these things are happening at the time when the US elections are very near, like 2-3 months away, almost 2 months away now. Americans have a very keen interest. Donald Trump administration has a very keen interest because he's not doing very well on the domestic front. So he wants to gain some mileage on the international diplomacy, for which he can then take credit and go back to the US voters. And you've seen in the last few months, they first have struck a deal with between Israel and the UAE, and understandably that has been done by the US. And now only 2-3 days ago, Israel and Bahrain have struck a deal, peace deal. So all these things the US administration or the Trump administration is doing in order to get some mileage and go back to the voters. But even before that, Afghan peace deal, because in Israel's case, there are no US troops on the ground. Here in Afghanistan, for 19 years, they've been bogged down in a war that they can never win. And they knew it from the outset, that they could not win. So they were trying to disengage or somehow get out of Afghanistan, but they could not. So now, the American diplomacy has gone on even a fast track, and you saw in February 2020, this year, that the Americans and the Taliban, they sat down in Doha and they struck a deal for peace in Afghanistan. However, the skeptics looked at it unfavorably because they said Afghan government is a stakeholder and they were not involved. But it was by the US design. They were first wanting to bring the Taliban onto the talking table. They knew that they could go back and negotiate very well with the Afghan government. It was the Taliban which was the difficult part. So now, although this would have started in August, they said August the 17th the dialogue will start again, but somehow the delay was because the Taliban, they were insisting on their demands, and one of their key demands was the release of 1,000 prisoners.
Yep.
Mr. Ashraf Ghani released the rest of them, and I think only 320 are left over. And they claimed that those are the really, really hardcore criminals who actually killed Afghans. And even the Europeans, they were not very happy about the release of all those.
The Afghan government says that all those who have not yet been released are all involved in killings and heinous crimes.
Yes.
Primarily.
So it was one of the major burning issues for the Taliban was the release of the prisoners. I think they have, in the backdoor diplomacy, they have come to an agreement, and Ashraf Ghani, and that is why you see Mr. Abdullah is actually leading the delegation to Doha, because now there has been a communication between the US, the Afghans and the Taliban that these burning issues that were the roadblocks in the deal to go forward, they have been ironed out. And as you said, the visit of Mr. Zalmay Khalilzad to Pakistan, even if Pakistan is not there on the negotiating table in Doha, well, everybody knows we are a major stakeholder, because Pakistan has been saying all along that peace in Pakistan is directly proportional to peace in Afghanistan. So if there is peace in Afghanistan, Pakistan will prosper. And vice versa, both countries are interlinked because Afghanistan is a landlocked country and there are cultural similarities. There are people on both sides of the border who are related to each other, and they cross almost 30,000 people, 25 to 30,000 people cross the Afghan border every day, come over to Pakistan or go to Afghanistan. So Pakistan has a major role to play, and it has always had a role to play. Indians may not have liked it, they don't like it, but the fact remains, you can't ignore Pakistan. And that is why, even if Pakistanis are not sitting on the table in Doha, Zalmay Khalilzad has to come and take Pakistanis on board.
So
on what measures are
when
taken.
the American diplomats, they say that the road to peace to Afghanistan actually goes through Pakistan primarily. So that's a correct statement.
Unfortunately, they realized it very late. When Pakistanis have been saying this all along, they first did not understand why Pakistani, because they thought Pakistan wants to install a government in Afghanistan which is very pro-Pakistan, which is not the fact. The fact is, the peace in Afghanistan is directly proportional to Pakistan's peace. So we were not doing it because we wanted a puppet government in Afghanistan. The fact is, peace in both countries is directly related to each other. And now the Americans have realized, they first thought we'll probably be able to fight and win the war. And in 19 years, they've failed. So they've now come to a realization that we can't win a war with Afghans. And you know the history.
Obviously, sir, it has to have a political solution. Military options they have all used, and now they understand that that was something which wasn't at all helpful in the entire cause. Now, moving on to you, Abdul Basit Saab, but before that, let me also welcome Dr. Hussain Surwardi Saab. Dr. Saab, thank you very much for your time as well. Thank you very much. But Dr. Saab, I'll just get back to you. Let me put this question to Abdul Basit Saab now. Basit Saab, I was going through a statement of the Indian External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, and he said that, well, we support the Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. But he used another word. He said it should be Afghan-controlled too. Do you think, sir, the Afghan government is in a state, is in a position to control this entire, I would say, happenings all around them? Number one. And secondly, what exactly did he mean by that, sir? Obviously, we also say it should be Afghan-owned, Afghan-led. This third introduction of the word controlled, let's throw light on that aspect.
So we all know that this peace process which took place in Qatar is Afghan-led and Afghan-owned in some ways, yes. Can it be controlled? Can the peace process be, if they really control it, then how are you going to come to a middle point? Because there have to be give and takes, right? So when the peace process starts, negotiations start, the basic principle is both parties to the conflict, they state their positions, which are maximalist positions, right? And then they talk to each other, and there are compromises and middle grounds found, and this is how it moves forward. I really don't think so, anyone is in a position in this process to control it. By controlling, they are obviously referring to the Afghan government, that they should stay in power. Because I think the main contention going forward from this round of talks onwards would be that can there be a transition government? Because Ashraf Ghani, he has made it quite clear that he has a 5-year mandate, and whatever arrangements have to be there, those arrangements should be incorporation, if at all, of the Taliban within the current power structure. And their own reading of the among other demands is that Taliban, perhaps if they really come to any sort of agreement, would be to move towards a transition government, amendments in the constitution, so on and so forth, and then have a government which is a national representative government. So I think these are well known facts. So controlling the process at this stage, I think, is a wishful thinking. So that's the answer to your question. Just a bit on the first one is that if the American elections are in 2 months' time, you can't have peace on wishes and aspirations of the American politicians. They couldn't close the war for 18, 19 years. They can't really clinch the deal in 2 months. How do you do that? I think, and having a deal is not a problem. You can have a deal tomorrow. The issue really is, will the deal hold? What happens after the deal is more important than what leads to the deal. And we have seen there have been deals in the past in Afghanistan. Geneva Accord, there were other accords, Peshawar Accord, Makkah Accord. But then what happened? The fight continued. So I think this rush for exiting Afghanistan by getting the two parties to sign some form of an agreement, these quick fixes are going to hurt Afghanistan in the long run. They will haunt the Afghan neighborhood, particularly Pakistan also. That is why I think one of the Pakistani demands of peace guarantor, who is the guarantor of what is going on here, is an important point. So I think you can't control the process. It's not possible, and you really cannot have peace just because the American elections are here and President Trump's want as many trophies as he can to showcase to his electorate. Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's a very important point. So this controlling aspect is something which is wishful thinking primarily. That's what I've understood. Now, over to you, Hussain Sarwardi Saab. Very interesting speech the day after, I think it was most likely on Saturday. There was this statement, and then again, 4-point agenda was presented by the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. It had 4 points. Let's start off from the first one. He says to continue to support the Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process while respecting the consensus that emerges from the intra-Afghan negotiations. Now, intra-Afghan negotiations, that's very important, and obviously when we talk about certain other factors, I think everybody is trying to balance each other in a way that the entire process moves smoothly and eventually the desired results are achieved. Your take on the first point, sir? Sarwardi Saab. Hussain Sarwardi Saab, can you hear me, sir? Okay, we'll just get back to Sarwardi Saab, but let me put this question to you, Janjua Saab. To continue the support of Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process while respecting the consensus. Now, respecting the consensus that emerges from the intra-Afghan negotiations. Now, there are two sides to it. We support the Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and at the same time respect the consensus. What if the consensus are not in alignment with the Afghan-owned and Afghan-led? And we have seen this and witnessed it in so many other negotiation processes as well, sir.
Well, we have seen some of the key demands the Taliban have made as part of this peace process. One is that they should be part of any future government. So primarily what the negotiations are going on right now would be around, and this is the most difficult part, because there's a government which has, after a lot of difficulties, lot of infighting between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah, a government has been installed only a few months ago. So now, if this peace deal is signed, which apparently now the government is also part of this negotiation process, so that means the Taliban would want a share in the government, or there would be an interim government. So what would happen to the existing government? So this is one issue. The other issue is Taliban demand a Sharia law or a Islamic Sharia government. Now this is something which will not sit well with a lot of people. And the third thing obviously is, as we talked about, the prisoner swap. Now these are the burning issues that they will have to discuss, and the consensus that we are talking about will have to be built upon these demands. The Afghan government per se has not put the demands as such, the way Taliban have put, or the way the Americans have put.
Because the Taliban always spoke from a position of strength. They
have
negotiated from a higher point, sir.
Americans have been demanding, yes, they disconnect from the Al-Qaeda and stop the attacks and the armed attacks. And as part of this agreement since February 2020, Americans have been honoring that commitment, and the Taliban to some extent have been honoring that commitment. It is to be seen what composite consensus is built up as a result of these negotiations. Although very, very difficult demands. For example, I can imagine Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah would probably not be keen on sharing the government with the Taliban at the time. But I would say again, Donald Trump is a deal maker. You may like him or not. He is famous for cracking deals.
Let's see.
And he must have done his homework, because he wants to go back to the American voters with something in his bag. And he's probably talked to Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah, a lot of aid packages and all those things he would have promised. Moreover, he wants to reduce the number of troops to 5,000 by November, which is just around the election time. And then by May 2021, he wants to completely take back the American troops from Afghan soil. So that's going to be very, very well settled with the American public if he can do that. So I'm sure there's a lot of backdoor dealing and wheeling going on.
All right. Now, this is a very important point, sir. But let's move on to the second one now. And let me also engage Surwardi Saab now. Surwardi Saab, I hope you can hear me this time clearly.
Very rightly and clearly, loud and
Perfect. Let me read this out. The second point presented by the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi regarding the peace process. He says to ensure that Afghanistan neither witnesses the violent days of the past nor becomes a space for elements who would harm other beyond its borders. So primarily what he's saying that how to ensure that countries surrounding Afghanistan, for example Pakistan and Iran and a couple of other countries, these countries in the north of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, etc. How to ensure that part, because once the vacuum is there, sir, the non-state actors, they can fill that. And in that particular case, we have seen that whether there is a presence of Daesh or maybe Al-Qaeda, yes or no, I'm not sure, but there are factions. You talk about TTP, you talk about Jamaatul Ahrar, you talk about so many other factions of these splinter groups. How to ensure that peace prevails, and yet the countries surrounding Afghanistan, they should also live in peace rather than having a threat from within Afghanistan?
I believe you have asked a very pertinent question in the current circumstances. And the reason is that for the last so many months, we're talking about intra-Afghan dialogue. But finally, the dialogue started between the Taliban and the government in Kabul. That has shattered the dream. Let me say it in the very beginning. We expected that all factions of Afghanistan will be represented in intra-Afghan dialogue. We again and again stated that it should not be bilateral, it should be multilateral. Now, all those factions which have been left behind in these negotiations, they are the ones who are responsible for spoilers that you just talked about, which means TTP and Al Qaeda and Daesh. They are trying to strengthen themselves in Afghanistan. Had there been all factions of Afghanistan represented in present negotiations, which are in process in Doha, things would have been definitely different, because all factions would have spoken differently, and they would have struggled for peace. Right now, we see Hikmatyar is not there. We see Jamiyat is not there. We see Wahdat-e-Milli is not there. If they are not there, of course, resentment would pop up, and this resentment may lead to fetching some support from these terrorist outfits that you just mentioned, which means Al Qaeda, Daesh, and TTP. So in the circumstances, I am quite worried about it. I am still anticipating that a time would come after these initial meetings that all other factions which are left out in Afghanistan would be called on, and they would be asked to participate in present Doha negotiations.
All right. Now, Basit Saab, over to you for the. I'm instead of the third point, I'm switching over to the fourth one. That is also very interesting. The foreign minister said to ensure a well-resourced, time-bound return of Afghan refugees to their homeland with dignity and honor. Now, dignity and honor, I think, let me put a cross on those two words, because what we witnessed when these prisoners were sent back, when these refugees were sent back to Afghanistan, I mean, most of these people, they were born, this is the third or maybe in certain cases fourth generation living in Pakistan, sir. And these, there was a number which was around 3 million, and I'm sure that 3 million has multiplied for sure. So how to ensure their future and how to sort of pluck them out from Pakistan and tell them to go back to Afghanistan, which is a war-torn country. Over here, they're doing well. They have the ID cards, they have the passports, they are having proper businesses, they own properties. Basit Saab.
I think for the fourth point, we are running a little ahead of the story here, and perhaps we are too optimistic. As Sohrawardi Saab said, he's worried some factions are not part of the intra-Afghan negotiation. So, it had to be a representative sample of various ethnic and political groups participating. I think repatriation of refugees is really at the other end of the spectrum, provided these talks, this round is successful, provided there is some agreement and consensus, provided there is peace, provided there is a formula of power sharing, then this fourth point comes in. Now we send back the refugees. I think for the refugees to go back with honor and dignity, as pointed out by our foreign minister, we have to focus on the first 2 points, which is, we keep these parties engaged in the dialogue. That is very, very important. Remember, the last 19 years have been the third phase of this conflict, which has been ongoing for, I think, almost 40 years now. So it will take time. I think dialogue, yes, it should be time bound, but we really want to go along the lines of a calendar driven agenda or more on a condition based approach. I think there is still a lot of suspicions. Just imagine that these were tactical issues, tactical issues on prisoners release and other things. This dialogue was supposed to start sometime in March. We are in September, mid of September. It is this difficult to get these parties together on a table. So I don't think so. If it took 6 months for these parties to come to the table, you can't have an agreement in 2 months' time, irrespective of how good a deal maker Trump is. That's good for him because he can show the trophy. But what happens in Afghanistan is going to hurt its neighbor, more directly Pakistan. So I think for refugees to go back, there has to be peace in Afghanistan, and it has to be an inclusive peace. That peace has to have buy-in of the various Afghan stakeholders, and for Afghans to be the owner of their own destiny, the representation has to be there. As of now, I think what has happened in Qatar, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but with cautious optimism, I would say the American wish of bringing them to the table prior to election, that has been fulfilled. But is it really moving towards peace? I think we'll have to wait and see. So let's be cautiously optimistic about it. These are good optics. Ice breaking session was there. Bringing these parties on the same table in and of itself is a huge symbolic success, good omen for the peace process. But we need to really wait and see and measure our analysis with the dose of and reality check. Yeah.
All right. So, Surwati Saab, your comment on the same point, sir.
Yeah, I believe that at the moment we are in a fix vis-a-vis of refugees. There are two very important phenomena when it comes to refugees repatriation. One is pull factor and the other is push factor. We tried our levels best in the last 15 years to push them back into Afghan territory in collaboration with the UNHCR. We very badly failed. Now, the question is that, is there any pull factor? When we say pull, it means, is Afghanistan conducive for refugees? One. Second thing, is Afghanistan government is still having a minister for Afghan refugees repatriation? Is Afghanistan giving some kind of shelters, food and clothing free to the refugees so that they may feel attracted to go back? My answer to all these questions is negative. It is in negative, which means that there is no such thing called attractive package for Afghan refugees so that they may feel secure by going back. So I am at the moment conducting a research in which I am trying to find out the reflections of refugees settled in Pakistan vis-a-vis Doha peace process. For till now, what I interviewed, I got the impression that they say that we are not believing in any such peace process that may not result in repatriation of ourselves back to Afghanistan. They say that we have spent time, our generations are born here, and we do not want to live here as refugees, as a second-class citizen. They say that we want to go back to our country, but it should be attractive. There should be something which may attract us to go back.
Surwati Saab, the question is that go where? In a war-torn country, sir, where there is no economy, no business, no jobs as such, no schooling, colleges, I mean, you talk about a country which is totally dependent on the US dollars in order to run their day-to-day affairs. Let me engage Janjua Saab, the third point actually, because we discussed the fourth point for a reason before the third one. The third one says to deepen and sustain economic engagement with Afghanistan for its reconstruction and economic development. Now, sir, I still remember once Pakistan offered them $500 million in aid, they refused to take it. India was investing left, right and center. Chinese have taken over in certain areas. The trust deficit is there, and it is a lot, by the way. And secondly, sir, when a country, I mean, you can't just keep on throwing dollars in an economy and let it work, even for the payments of their military forces, of the law enforcement agencies, even the people working in the government sector, they're all dependent on the US printed dollar in order to run their affairs. Now, sir, just tell me that how to start, actually where to start from, at what needs to be done, because you can't change the economy of a war-torn country, sir, in months' time or maybe in a year's time or something.
Agreed. But before, if you allow me, I'll just go back a little bit.
Sure, please go ahead.
I just want to. On the refugees issue, in the 1980s, there are about 3.5 to 4 million refugees in Pakistan. That came down in 2015-16, that came down to 1.7 million. As far as my information goes, and Mr. Surwati is conducting a research, I'm sure he'll agree with me or correct me if I'm wrong. As of today, there are only 330,000 or plus minus refugees in Pakistan. A lot of them have still gone back. But why are we so skeptical? Do we not think that the US forces exiting from Afghanistan is in Pakistan's interest? This region becoming peaceful with the exit of American forces, much more peaceful. That's one thing. And the other thing about inclusion of all factions, as Mr. Abdul Basit was saying, I have just a small comment, and not to negate his point of view, but the point is, this is what the Americans tried soon after the 9/11, that they tried to install the Northern Alliance and the so and so forth, and they saw that they were not representing a large-scale section of the society. Eventually, Taliban flexed their muscles and proved they control most of the Afghanistan. And that is why today you see that Taliban are on the negotiating table and no one else, because they don't have anything to prove that they have some majority or control of some area. That's why they are not the major stakeholder. Yes, they might be a smaller stakeholder. At some stage, they would be engaged. Now, coming over to your recent question, Rome was not built in a day. I am being very optimistic. I see this very positively. I want to believe, and I am very optimistic, that Afghan peace is on the doorstep. It will happen. It will not happen overnight. Yes, this has been a country which has been war-torn for the last 4 decades. So it will take some time to come back to normal. But let's give peace a chance. There is an opportunity. Yes, there are a lot of troubling questions. You will strike a deal, but what will happen afterwards when the Americans leave? So see for it, maybe the Americans are bringing in some tools, some measures, some form of aid that will let Afghans stand up on their own feet. Although it's not that easy, it's easier said than done. But I'm being very optimistic that this is still going to be better than what they are in for last 19 years or for last 4 decades. I'm very optimistic that somehow, if the 3 factions, one of the major stakeholders is the US government because they have their troops there. So if the 3 of the stakeholders, major stakeholders, have come to the negotiating table, there is some hope for the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, he was saying that they have not been sitting down since February. One major event was COVID, because obviously because of COVID, and obviously the mistrust between the factions because of the lack of release of prisoners. So one of the major stumbling blocks was the lack of release of prisoners.
That's correct.
And I am very positive that has now been addressed, and that's why they are back on table. They were supposed to go back on table on the 17th
Because this was primarily because of the Loya Jirga, actually.
So let's hope for the outcome.
I believe even the President Ashraf Ghani never wanted it, because he in fact created a scene, I would say.
And you know, Zalmay Khalilzad has today met the army chief, because they know Pakistan is a major stakeholder and Pakistan has a lot of leverage on the Taliban. So they know if Taliban somehow are being snowflakey.
We still have leverage on the Taliban, sir?
I want to believe we have very good relationship with the Taliban. What we did for them in the Afghan jihad, they really, really value that and they respect that. And that is why don't you see the situation in Pakistan as fairly normalized compared to what used to be in the yesteryears? It is all because of the Pakistani military flexing its leverage over the Afghan Taliban. That is why they come back to the army chief, because they understand Pakistan has a major role. Although we have not been supporting them militarily, but they do listen to us because we are very close. And they've always been very close to us because they share the language, they share the religion and so many other things. So we have leverage over them. And I think we can use that to our advantage because we want peace in our country as well. So if there's peace in Afghanistan, there'll be peace in Pakistan. So why shouldn't I be optimistic about it? I want to be optimistic. Yes, maybe it takes 2 years after the Americans
It is going to take
leave.
time. I mean, if everything goes the way they plan. But there could be a lot of hindrances, a lot of obstacles, a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
In this
I
entire
agree with
journey.
you.
Sir, let me talk to Basit Saab. Now, Basit Saab, first of all, your comment regarding this particular point, because it's a war-torn country. It needs a lot, in terms of cash, in terms of support, in terms of logistics. I remember I was having a word with the Commerce Minister, Razak Daud Saab, and he said that he's going to go, it's about a month ago, he went to Afghanistan where he negotiated the bilateral trade issues. He also negotiated about the Afghan transit trade issues. So Pakistan is there to support them in every way, because obviously, as we all believe, that Afghanistan is a landlocked city and the only better option they have is why Pakistan? Basit Saab.
Yeah, I mean, so if I understood your question and point correctly, I more or less agree with Janjua Saab that, we have never been this close to peace in Afghanistan. If you look at the overall picture, the US-Pakistan equation is, friction-free right now. Afghanistan, Pakistan, they have stopped blaming and they have fairly normal ties. If you look at all the parties, all the stakeholders, regional, local, or international, there is a war fatigue. Everyone wants to give peace a chance, and everybody realizes there is no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. So negotiation is the only way. So yes, if you put all these points together, there is a lot of hope and optimism there. Well, why I want to be very, very cautiously optimistic about it is, Amrullah Saleh, the vice president, he narrowly escaped. I don't know who the spoilers are. I never saw who claimed the responsibility. But whoever these spoilers are, had he been taken out, you won't have been having these talks. So,
Sir, he was the former head of NDC, very close to the Indian lobby, sir. We all understand.
So there you go. So there you go. You need one event. You need one event to derail the entire process. It is that flimsy.
So you
I
believe
think
that this attack on Abdullah Saleh, who was the former head of NDC, very close to RAW, very close to the Indian movers and shakers, if this man was eliminated, you think this entire process would have been derailed?
if you take out just a couple of days
India.
before, yeah, I mean, just a couple of days before Doha process, if you eliminate the vice president of Afghanistan, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I think at least that round is over for me. I would assume that would have happened. So, like one event can just derail. So that is why I'm saying, and this is what I think the Pakistani official position is, they continue to point out regional spoilers or other spoilers in the process. Eventually, I think, once you talk and you continue to talk, you do find the middle ground. Is there a will right now in Afghanistan? I really, if I look at it, Karzai opted out, Hekmatyar never came. So is it really the atmosphere that right? I mean, you can ask me the question, then what is the right time for peace? Any time is right time for peace. But are the conditions on the ground conducive enough? I mean, I'll take that with a pinch of salt. But yes, all good indicators are also there. There is a will on the part of the US, will on the part of Pakistan. If they can keep these parties engaged in the process, let's hope some positive would come out of it.
Definitely, sir. That's a very important point. Conducive environment is the key. Basit Saab, thank you very much. I understand that since you have joined us from Singapore and it is almost midnight there, so we would let you go and we would say thank you very much for your participation. And inshallah, we'll be talking to you soon again in our programs. Thank you very much. But over to you now, Surwardi Saab. An important point. If you remember, sir, on the floor of the House, the American Secretary of State, the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, was very open, very candid when she said that when the Russian forces left Afghanistan and we pulled out as well, there was it was a very wrong decision and we did not even consider what is going to happen out there in that area. And eventually we all got to know that the Taliban took over, and interestingly, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, UAE, these were the frontline countries to accept their government. But now it seems that since Bahrain is joining hands with Israel, UAE has done that, obviously with the will of the Saudis. Now Qatar is a one country, odd one out from the Middle Eastern states, that is holding the talks and that is taking the initiative. How do you see this scenario, Surwardi Saab? Support for the Afghanistan. I think, Surwardi, but we'll try to get back to him, sir. You answer that question, sir.
Look, Qataris have been providing space to Taliban for a very long time. The only country which allowed a Taliban representative office in Doha was Qatar. So Qatar has always, however, now what happens tomorrow is, obviously I don't represent the Qatari government, but this is based on my assessment and analysis. If at all Qatar would recognize Israel, would be among the very last ones. It will not be the next one. Why?
So the kind of alignment Qatar is following, whether with the Turkish or with the Iranians for that matter,
and
I don't think they'll opt for that.
Qatar is anti-Saudi Arabia and anti-UAE as well. So Qatar is highly unlikely to go into a bloc where the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are sitting. That's one thing. Two, Qatar has been supporting the Palestinians extensively. They have built a complete city there. Qatar have been supporting the Lebanese, the Palestinians. So Qatar is highly unlikely. They have good relations with the Americans, but they are unlikely to accept Israel. And they are, in a way, a major stakeholder, although they are not geographically located close to Afghanistan, But just because they were the only one who allowed the Taliban to
Open up their office,
open
sir.
their office,
Yeah.
so Qatar will have a lot of say.
And
in
Afghan current government had a lot of issues with that also.
Yeah, they had
A parallel
because
government.
They were not happy that there's a parallel government operating in Qatar, and the Afghan Taliban were getting VIP treatment. I've lived in Qatar, so I've seen the Taliban roaming around in Qatar like anybody else. So the question is, the Qataris are not in the near future likely to accept Israel. However, they are now on the table with the Americans, but that there are different compartments. Americans are dealing with different things at a different time. So they've involved Qatar for Afghanistan, but they are not going to pressurize them, at least for now, because they don't want to be in two boats. So they're going to isolate things or issues separately. So that's my take.
All right. So, Sarwadi Saab, now a question for you that was, in fact, answered by our guest in the studio, and that is primarily about the future of the economy of Afghanistan. I mean, I fail to understand how will they build it, because I have a very clear concept in this, that the American president has said it on numerous occasions that why are we spending our billions and billions and billions, rather trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, and that was an absolute wastage. I don't think he's going to support the Afghan government once they vacate the area. What would the future like? Will it be India? Will it be China? Will it be Pakistan, Qatar? Who's going to sort of look after their affairs, day-to-day affairs, I would say?
Yeah, it's a very good question once again, Rahman. I believe that at the moment, when we are speaking about this subject, Afghanistan has $6 billion of economy. You know well that their total expenses on their national security forces is even beyond that. So therefore, I believe this is a high time that the economy of Afghanistan may also be brought into consideration. Right now, Afghanistan needs preferential trade and preferential treatment as far as economy is concerned. So I believe that in the circumstances, it would not be, as you stated, China, India, Pakistan, that would contribute to their economy, but rather there would be a full-fledged package with this agreement that is in process, peace agreement in intra-Afghan dialogue. The process of Doha agreement will be completed, and afterwards, all the world community, they would go very sympathetically towards Afghanistan, which means that products that Afghanistan is producing, they will be purchased so that they may have more export and more industries will be installed in the country. But all this depends on how successful this peace process will result, how Taliban will compromise with the Kabul regime, and how Kabul regime will accommodate elements like Taliban in the national government. All this depends on that. Afterwards, there would be numerous agreements that will take care of the economy of Afghanistan.
Well, don't you think that the role of the Indians would really multiply in that particular case, sir? Or you believe that the Chinese can actually take over certain areas as far as their building of economy is concerned?
Remember that India is not neighboring country of Afghanistan. So whatever product enters in Afghanistan or it goes out, of course, it will be very expensive for Afghanis as well as for Indians. But when it comes to Pakistan or other neighboring countries like Iran and towards Central Asia, they would be in a better position to export to them, to Afghanistan, and import from there. One thing. Second thing, as it is landlocked, Pakistan kind of countries will provide a more safe passage to them at a lesser price, which will be compensated by countries which were present during Bonn agreement, and of course a lot of financial assistance was promised, which was not fulfilled, but there were countries who had promised with them. So those will be the factors that would be important. It would not be India that would be the main stakeholder in this process.
All right, thank you very much, Sarwadi Saab, for your comments. Over to you, sir. And if I may add a quick question for you here, sir.
They're sitting on the energy corridor. The Tapi gas pipeline will pass through Afghanistan. They stand to gain a lot. And then they are mineral-rich country. And mark my words, the moment Americans leave Afghanistan, China will come. China will come in, and China will come in big time. If they've invested $62 billion in Pakistan and they're talking about $400 billion in Iran, they will not leave Afghanistan.
Over $1 trillion in this region, sir, when you talk about these, I mean, when we say the softer belly of the Russians, and I'm sure Russians would be very happy if the Chinese are investing there in that particular part. And you talked about the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline. I'm not sure whether it is going to be TAPI, maybe it could be a TAP.
TAP only,
But the
maybe.
point is that, again, we have worked very hard on that, and Pakistan, China, all these countries, even India, they're all energy thirsty countries, sir, and I'm sure this is going to play a very relevant role. But thank you very much, sir, for your comments and for your participation in our programs. I'll just say that the foreign minister, in fact, said something very interesting. He said that the Afghan leaders need to seize this historic opportunity. They should work together in a very constructive manner. They should also secure an inclusive and broad-based and comprehensive political settlement. Now, this is something, I think it's easier said than done, but the point is that eventually that is going to be the course of action they need to take. Afghanistan is in a very complex situation. There are so many stakeholders, so many non-state actors playing their role in that part of the world. But as they say, that if there is peace in Afghanistan, there is peace in Pakistan, and peace in Pakistan matters the most to us. We've been able to eliminate most of these problems which we were facing earlier. We are in a, I think, on a high at the moment, where we really want to take off and let our economy take off as well. It will take time, but I think the most important, first and the foremost area is about the Afghan settlement. Peace and prosperity at the end of the day. Anyway, thank you very much for watching our show. I'll see you again tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.